In the sun-kissed streets of Costa Rica, where vibrant cultures and diverse traditions collide, an unimaginable crime shattered a community's sense of peace. It began as an affair, a secret liaison between a rabbi's wife and 3 young men. What followed would be a tale of betrayal, obsession, and ultimately, murder. Miriam Goldstein, once beloved and respected as the wife of a rabbi, had her life destroyed in a way no one could have predicted. Her secret affair set off a chain of events that would leave a family torn apart, a community in shock, and a life lost in the most tragic of ways. This is the haunting true crime story of how passion led to murder, and how a life built on faith fell victim to its own darkest desires. In the sun-soaked landscapes of Costa Rica, where verdant rainforests meet shimmering coastlines, life often seemed as tranquil as the gentle waves lapping the shores. But beneath the surface of this idyllic paradise, secrets festered, ones capable of shattering lives and unraveling communities. This is the story of Miriam Goldstein, the wife of a prominent rabbi whose choices led to a web of deceit, betrayal, and ultimately, a gruesome murder that shocked the nation. Rabbi David Goldstein was a respected figure in San Jose's Jewish community. A deeply religious man, his life revolved around his faith, his family, and the synagogue he had built from the ground up. The Goldsteins, with their 2 teenage daughters, were seen as a model family, pillars of morality in an ever-changing world. Miriam, David's wife of 20 years, was the embodiment of grace and piety, or so it seemed. Miriam, at 42, was a striking woman with an undeniable presence. Her raven neck hair framed a face that still held the glow of her youth, and her piercing blue eyes seemed to look straight into your soul. She was a devoted mother and an active participant in synagogue activities, from organizing charity drives to leading prayer groups for women. To outsiders, her life appeared perfect. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, Miriam struggled with feelings of isolation and suffocation. Married at 22, she had spent the last 2 decades living in the shadow of her husband's larger-than-life persona. While David's work brought him respect and admiration, Miriam felt increasingly invisible. The spark that once defined their marriage had faded into routine. Lonely and yearning for connection, she found herself drawn to a world far removed from her own, a world of risk and forbidden desires. It all began innocently enough. Miriam often visited a cafe in downtown San Jose after her morning errands. It was her quiet escape, a place where she could sip her coffee and read without interruption. It was there, one humid afternoon in May 2022, that she first met Matteo, a 25-year-old local artist. Tall and athletic, with deep brown skin and an easy charm, Matteo radiated a confidence that was both disarming and intoxicating. Matteo's flirtations were subtle at first. A compliment here, a lingering glance there. Miriam, initially hesitant, found herself drawn to his vibrant energy. It wasn't long before their casual conversations turned into long, secretive meetings. For Miriam, Matteo represented everything her life lacked: passion, excitement, and the thrill of being truly seen. But Matteo wasn't alone. Through him, Miriam met his 2 closest friends, Andres and Leon, both in their late 20s. Andres, a musician, had a magnetic personality and a mischievous smile that could light up any room. Leon, quieter and more introspective, worked as a bartender at a popular beachside resort. Together, the 3 men formed a tight-knit trio, their bond forged in shared struggles and dreams of a better life. What began as an affair with Matteo soon spiraled into a complicated web of relationships. Miriam found herself entangled with all 3 men, each offering her something different. With Matteo, it was raw passion, with Andres a sense of adventure, and with Leon, emotional depth. The relationships, though exhilarating, were fraught with danger. Miriam knew she was playing with fire, but the thrill was too intoxicating to resist. For months, she jiggled her secret life with her responsibilities at home. The deception required meticulous planning, late-night rendezvous, carefully crafted alibis, and a constant awareness of her surroundings. But no secret can stay hidden forever, especially one so perilous. The first cracks began to show when David noticed Miriam's increasing absences and distracted presence. Concerned but unaware of the full extent of what was going on, he attributed her behavior to the stress of raising teenagers and managing household responsibilities. However, His suspicions grew when he discovered a text message on Miriam's phone, a message that hinted at a relationship far more intimate than he could have imagined. David's discovery marked the beginning of the suspicion. Unknown to Miriam, he began tracking her movements, piecing together the fragments of her double life. By late September 2022, he had gathered enough evidence to confirm his worst fears. The betrayal was devastating, not just as a husband, but as a spiritual leader whose life was built on principles of faith and integrity. David confronted Miriam in the privacy of their home, a confrontation that ended in tears, accusations, and promises of change. Miriam vowed to end the affairs and rebuild their marriage, but the situation was far more complicated than either of them realized. Mateo, Andres, and Leon had grown deeply attached to Miriam, and the idea of losing her was unacceptable to them. As Miriam attempted to distance herself, tensions escalated. Their jealousy and possessiveness grew, leading to heated arguments and thinly veiled threats. Miriam's life, once so orderly and predictable, spiraled into chaos. The breaking point came on the night of November 15, 2022. David, desperate to salvage his marriage and protect his family's reputation, arranged a meeting with Mateo. The confrontation was meant to be a cool, organized discussion, but emotions ran high. Andres and Leon, who had followed Mateo to the meeting, quickly joined in, turning what should have been a conversation into a volatile standoff. The details of that night remain murky, pieced together through witness statements and forensic evidence. What is clear is that the meeting turned violent. Fueled by a mix of anger, fear, and desperation, the confrontation escalated into physical abuse. Want to stay up to date with the most recent crime stories and updates? Subscribe now and you'll always have the latest, most detailed cases delivered right to your feed. In the chaos, David was fatally injured, his lifeless body left in a remote field on the outskirts of the city. The murder sent shockwaves through San Jose. The discovery of David's body the next morning, coupled with the subsequent arrests of Mateo, Andres, and Leon, dominated headlines. As the truth of Miriam's involvement emerged, the public's outrage turned to fascination, the story becoming fodder for both tabloids and serious journalism. For the Goldstein family, the aftermath was devastating. Miriam, now under investigation for her role in the events leading up to David's death, found herself vilified in the court of public opinion. Her daughters, once shielded from the complexities of adult life, were thrust into a world of grief, shame, and uncertainty. The case, dubbed the rabbi's wife affair by the media, became a symbol of betrayal and moral decay. It raised uncomfortable questions about infidelity, race, and power dynamics, forcing Costa Rica to confront its own prejudices and social hypocrisies. But the story was far from over. As investigators delved deeper into the relationships between Miriam and the three men, they uncovered a web of lies, manipulation, and conflicting motives. What had begun as a secret affair had spiraled into a tale of obsession and murder, one that would leave no life untouched. The aftermath of Rabbi David Goldstein's murder rippled through every corner of San Jose. His death wasn't just a tragedy for his family, but also a seismic event for the local Jewish community. In a city where faith and community ties ran deep, the idea that such a respected leader could meet such a violent end was almost unthinkable. Yet, as investigators dug deeper, the story revealed layers of betrayal, obsession, and desperation that painted a picture far darker than anyone could have anticipated. For Miriam, the days following David's murder were a haze of shock, grief, and mounting fear. The police initially approached her as a grieving widow, but it didn't take long for her carefully constructed facade to crumble. Detectives, led by Inspector Juan Alvarez, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for persistence, quickly noticed inconsistencies in Miriam's behavior. Her alibis were shaky, her emotions seemed erratic, and her reluctance to provide clear answers only fueled suspicion. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Miriam's phone records were analyzed. The digital trail revealed months of frequent communication with Mateo, Andres, and Leon. What had initially been dismissed as casual acquaintanceship was now exposed as something far more intimate. When questioned, Miriam broke down and admitted to the affairs but vehemently denied any involvement in David's death. As the police pieced together the events leading up to the murder, they uncovered a volatile dynamic between Miriam and the three young men. Witness statements from neighbors and cafe regulars painted a picture of a woman caught in a dangerous spiral of passion and manipulation. According to testimony, Matteo had been the first to grow possessive, his initial charm giving way to jealous outbursts whenever Miriam tried to distance herself. Andres and Leon, while less overtly controlling, were no less invested in their relationship with Miriam. The toxic entanglement reached its peak in early November 2022, just weeks before David's murder. A string of text messages recovered from Miriam's phone revealed heated arguments and desperate pleas from all three men. Matteo, in particular, seemed unhinged, sending messages that oscillated between declarations of love and threats of exposure. "You can't leave us," one message read. "We've given you everything, and we'll make sure the world knows who you really are." Miriam, feeling trapped, confided in a close friend, Sofia, who later became a key witness in the case. Sofia described Miriam as a woman on the brink of collapse, torn between her fear of losing everything and her guilt over the betrayal. Sofia had urged Miriam to come clean to David and put an end to the dangerous relationships, but Miriam hesitated, worried about the scandal that would follow. The turning point came when David discovered Miriam's infidelity. According to Sofia, Miriam had confided that David had confronted her with undeniable evidence of her affairs. He was heartbroken and furious, but he also wanted to protect their daughters from the fallout. David's plan was to handle the situation quietly, confront Matteo, Andres, and Leon, and ensure they left Miriam alone. Unknown to David, his decision to confront the men would set in motion a chain of events that would lead to his death. On the night of November 15, David arranged to meet Matteo at a secluded spot just outside the city. He wanted answers and assurances that the relationship was over. What he didn't know was that Matteo had brought Andres and Leon with him, their loyalty to one another overriding any sense of caution. The confrontation quickly turned violent. Witnesses who lived near the meeting site reported hearing loud voices and sounds of a struggle. By the time the police arrived the following morning, David's lifeless body was discovered, showing signs of blunt force trauma and strangulation. The brutality of the attack shocked even seasoned investigators. Matteo, Andres, and Leon were arrested within 48 hours. Initially, they denied any involvement, but their alibis quickly fell apart under scrutiny. Forensic evidence linked them to the scene of the crime, and conflicting stories among the three men further incriminated them. Under intense questioning, Matteo eventually confessed, though he placed much of the blame on Miriam, claiming she had manipulated them into the confrontation. The trial that followed was a media spectacle, drawing national and international attention. Dubbed the Costa Rican rabbi murder case, it captivated audiences with its salacious details and complex web of relationships. Prosecutors painted Miriam as the catalyst for the tragedy, arguing that her affair with the three men had created a powder keg of jealousy and rage. Miriam's defense team, however, portrayed her as a victim of manipulation and emotional abuse. They argued that she had been swept up in a situation that spiraled out of her control, and while her actions were morally questionable, she had no role in David's death. The testimonies of Matteo, Andres, and Leon were particularly damning. Matteo described Miriam as a master manipulator who had pitted the men against one another to maintain control. Andres and Leon echoed these claims, painting Miriam as a woman who thrived on chaos and used her allure to exploit their vulnerabilities. Miriam, for her part, denied these accusations, maintaining that she had tried to end the relationships but was met with resistance and threats. The trial dragged on for months, with every detail dissected by the media. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some viewed Miriam as a femme fatale who had orchestrated the entire tragedy, while others saw her as a tragic figure trapped in a situation that spiraled out of control. The case also sparked broader discussions about infidelity, power dynamics, and the double standards faced by women in conservative communities. In April 2023, the verdict was finally delivered. Matteo, Andres, and Leon were found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Miriam, while cleared of direct involvement in the killing, was convicted of obstruction of justice and perjury for her attempts to cover up her relationships and mislead investigators. She received a 10-year sentence, a punishment that many felt was either too lenient or too harsh. depending on their perspective. For the Goldstein daughters, the aftermath of the trial was a nightmare. They were forced to confront the reality of their father's death and their mother's betrayal, all under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Friends and community members who once admired the family now treated them with pity or disdain. The synagogue that David had built struggled to recover from the scandal. Attendance dwindled, and the once thriving community fractured under the weight of gossip and judgment. As for Miriam, her time in prison became a period of reflection and regret. In letters to her daughters, she expressed deep remorse for her actions and the pain she had caused. "I lost sight of who I was," she wrote in one letter. "I made choices that can never be undone, and I will carry that burden for the rest of my life." Miriam's life in prison was an isolated one, filled with moments of deep reflection. The guilt of what she had allowed to happen weighed heavily on her, though the truth of her involvement in David's murder was still something she couldn't fully face. To the outside world, she was the widow of a beloved rabbi who had fallen from grace. But in the prison halls, she was a woman who had destroyed everything: her family, her reputation, and her future. The murder of her father he had committed would. He had frustrated her in her 74th round. Every day was a battle to understand how she had gone so wrong, how her once perfect life had unraveled so completely. In the weeks following the trial, the Goldstein daughters, Rachel and Sarah, found themselves under constant scrutiny. At school, they faced cruel whispers and rumors. They were the children of the woman who had betrayed her husband and caused his brutal death. Friends who had once been close distanced themselves, and family members who had been pillars of their support turned their backs. To them, Miriam's actions were unforgivable, and as her daughters, they would always be associated with that unforgivable tragedy. Rachel, the older of the two daughters, tried to keep things together. She became their voice in the public eye, speaking to the media with an air of strength that belied her inner turmoil. But even Rachel could not escape the fact that everything she once knew had shattered. She didn't just lose her father, she lost her mother too, in a way that was far more profound than she could have imagined. At the same time, Sarah, the younger daughter, withdrew into herself. The pain was too raw for her to articulate. She found solace in books and art, retreating into her own mind and creating a world where her family wasn't fractured by scandal. But as time passed, she became increasingly distant from the life she once knew. She couldn't look at her mother the same way anymore. Miriam had been a woman of power and prestige, someone who had been revered in their community, but now, Miriam was just another criminal, another person with a past that couldn't be erased. While the girls tried to cope with their own grief and loss, the Goldstein family's story became a national one. The media vultures swooped in, eager to extract every morsel of scandal and drama from the details of David's death. News outlets ran endless stories about the so-called rabbi's secret life, focusing on the affair, the betrayal, and the murder. It became a cautionary tale about trust, infidelity, and the destructive power of jealousy. Miriam, once seen as a pillar of the community, was now a cautionary figure, a woman who had destroyed her own life and the lives of those closest to her. The investigation into David's death had, in many ways, ended with the trial. Mateo, Andres, and Leon were convicted, and their sentences were harsh. Life in prison was a grim reality for the three men, but their punishments were nothing compared to the emotional toll Miriam faced. She spent her days isolated, cut off from her daughters and the outside world. Only a few close friends remained, and they were the ones who witnessed her struggles. Miriam spent much of her time writing letters. Letters to her daughters, to her friends, to herself. She wrote about her regrets, about the love she had lost, and about the dark path that had led her to this place. There were moments when she truly seemed remorseful, when her heart seemed to break for the children she had abandoned. In one of her letters, Miriam wrote, "I never thought I could be someone capable of such harm. I thought I was just living my life, that I was in control. But I was wrong. I made mistakes, and I took the lives of others with me when I made those mistakes. I will never forgive myself for what I've done." For the Goldstein daughters, the pain of their mother's betrayal was intertwined with the profound grief of losing their father. David had been their rock, their guiding light. He had raised them with love and discipline, teaching them the values of faith, community, and trust. But now they had to learn how to rebuild their lives without him and without the version of their mother they had once known. Miriam's actions had robbed them of their childhood, and the harshness of the public's judgment only added to their suffering. Rachel and Sarah's lives took different paths in the aftermath of the trial. Rachel, with her need to hold things together, eventually decided to leave Costa Rica and move to the United States. She enrolled in a university, hoping that a fresh start would help her rebuild her life and her sense of self. But the pain never truly went away. No matter how far she went, she carried the weight of her family's story with her. Her identity was forever tied to the scandal, and no matter how much she tried to distance herself from it, she would always be known as the daughter of the infamous Rabbi Goldstein and his unfaithful wife. Sarah, on the other hand, stayed in Costa Rica. She enrolled in a local art school and spent her days in her studio, painting, sculpting, and reflecting on the life she had lost. Her art became her refuge, a way to express the pain she couldn't verbalize. She began to explore themes of brokenness, loss, and the search for redemption. But even as her career blossomed, Sarah found it difficult to escape the legacy of her family's tragedy. Miriam, meanwhile, continued to serve her time in prison. Her days were filled with the monotonous routine of incarceration, but she never stopped writing. Her letters, which once seemed like desperate cries for understanding, began to take on a more contemplative tone. Miriam wrote less about the affair and more about the man she had once been, the wife of a rabbi, the mother of 2 daughters, the woman who had once believed she had it all. But with every passing day, that version of herself felt farther and farther away. It was clear that Miriam had changed. She had no choice but to come to terms with the consequences of her actions, but the reality of living with that guilt was almost unbearable. The isolation was suffocating, and the truth of her betrayal haunted her every waking moment. Yet, despite all the pain and remorse, she still clung to the hope that one day her daughters would forgive her. The tragedy of David Goldstein's murder and the complex web of betrayal that led to it became a story that would forever haunt the community. It was a tale of love, lies, and murder, one that served as a painful reminder of how fragile the boundaries between trust and destruction could be. For Miriam, the consequences were irreversible, but for Rachel and Sarah, the road to healing was just beginning, and it would be a journey that would take them far beyond the tragedy that had defined their lives. If you don't want to miss a second of the action, make sure you hit the notification bell after subscribing. That way, you'll always be the first to hear about the latest true crime cases we explore.